Hi, I'm Becky Rose Dungeon Girl and welcome to another episode of Dungeon Master Mistakes. Haven't done one of these in a while. Today's episode is going to be on dice cheating and how to spot it. Sorry for my slightly gaunt appearance, by the way, and I'm slightly shaky. I had an attempted house invasion this morning. The police have got the guy, but the weirdest thing, his car is still parked at an odd angle in the middle of the street. I don't know how long that's going to be there. It looks like my neighbours can still get out though. So the first technique to look out for is the half roll or short roll, or sometimes 1.5 roll. This is a technique that requires some skill and practice to pull off. But what you'll generally find is that a player will have the highest value on the dice facing a certain direction, and then they half roll it. So by having a short roll, they can control which number appears. In this case, I got my 6. This technique is good for dices up to about D10. It does take some practice, and there is a small amount of roll, 6 every time, which makes it look convincing. I'm not skilled at it, so I have to use a jumbo dice to pull it off. But yeah, that's one to watch out for. It's a hard one to spot because the dice does roll. And with a D10 you can never 100% guarantee it's going to land on a 10 because of course it's a relatively round dice. So that fact that it's not 100% means a player can keep doing it and a lot of the time get 10s and occasionally miss, which just adds to how convincing it can be. If you do spot this one, the best solution, as I always say, is a dice tower. I actually put dice towers at both ends of my table because the cool things, players like to use them anyway. Another technique which I only saw someone doing recently, which, to be honest, it astounded me. I'd never quite seen anything quite so brazen. And they were doing it with a dice tower. Well, actually, in this case, they're using a dice map. We'll get to that. But it's this. So they roll the dice, and in this case, it's landed on a 1. But they pick up the dice to look at it. So they're generally very quick to go in because they don't want anyone to see what number's there. So they roll the dice and they very quickly, in this case, turn it to a 6, even though it was a 4 when I picked the dice up, and I'm now looking at a 6. So that's one to look at. Oh, I did get a 6. I suppose the best way to spot this is that when they actually do get a good roll, they leave it in there. One of the oldest techniques is players taking the initiative over when to roll a dice, and they quite often do this. You'll spot it in players that tend to say, "Can I make a perception check?" And when they're initiating the skill roll, because what they'll do is they'll roll first. Not in that dice and that dice tower, they won't. So they'll roll first. So can I make a spot check? And they'll often do it even before players actually come to their turn. And if they don't like the result, in this case I did actually get a 1, they'll then wait for the GM to say, "What's your roll?" and then they'll roll again. Now this kind of player likes to have a delay between the two rolls so it's not obvious. So the best way to challenge that is to challenge them with what they already rolled, or to have a hard and fast rule at your table like I do, which is you wait for the GM to ask for the roll before you make it. 12. One I've seen a couple of times is rolling the wrong dice. So if I ask a player to roll a d10, here the player's rolled a d12, and that might sound like, why would you just roll the wrong dice? Well, the thing is, a d12 can cover everything on a d10, and 11 and 12 being a reroll. Because I used the wrong dice. Sorry, dice get a different result. But if it's less than 10, if the result comes up high, the player can say, "Oh, well, it still counts, because, it's still a number between 1 and 10. Well, if the number's low, then they go, "Oh, I used the wrong dice. Sorry about that." I just insist people roll the right dice, and if they get the wrong one, they always re-roll no matter the result. A common one is a form of opportunistic cheating that comes from the botched die. If I roll my dice and, well, I'll keep that result, thanks, it was a 6. If I roll my dice and it happens to end up in a botched position, I might choose to discard it because the dice is botched. Or I might choose to interpret the dice in my favour when it could be one of two numbers. Oftentimes when you've got a full role-playing table full of stuff and you've got your Pringles boxes and your Bombay mix, character sheets everywhere, dice all over the place, pens, papers, the table can become cluttered, and this creates opportunities for botched die. This is where having dedicated rolling areas help. I use dice towers. I have seen people use these dice trays. Most of the time we'll roleplay with people who we trust and are friends with. So how do we solve people dice cheating at our table? Of course many of you are just going to say, well, don't invite that player. But of course it's more complicated than that. If you're friends with these people, if you know these people, or if the person is a friend of a friend and so forth, sometimes not inviting that player isn't the right answer. But you still want to solve the dice cheat. You want to remove the cheating from the game because, well, it spoils the fun. So dice towers are a great way to do that, and they don't make cheating impossible, but they do make certain types of cheating impossible and make others harder. Dice trays don't really stop cheating. I don't have one. You've got to have strict rules that you enforce on dice at your table. Having a dedicated rolling area is one really good way to solve a lot of problems. But if you don't have one, and these are only about 20 quid, but I appreciate, not everyone's got 20 quid to spend on a dice roll, and if I've got 20 quid, actually, I'd rather spend it on, well, anything else. But if you are going to go without a dedicated rolling surface of some description, then you've got to have strict rules like the dice must finish on the table. The dice must be in front of everyone. You only roll when the GM asks. Any roll beforehand is automatically dismissed. Just having these rules for how dice work in your games, or how dice rolls are you're allowed to run in your games, just removes the opportunities to cheat. And that's, I think, the best way to approach having a dice cheat at your table. But unfortunately, there is no way to ever truly stop somebody who wants to cheat from cheating. They'll come up with all sorts of different ways to do it, like just happening to be really bad at bookkeeping their character sheet. Oh, do I only have +3? I'm sorry, I thought it was +8. Ultimately, if you have a cheat at your table, then they're a cheat. And sadly, it might be time for them to go, or to find someone else for your group, or to do different things with that friend than role-playing. Maybe you just need to talk to them about it. In my experience, when you talk to a cheat, even if you manage to do it in such a way that's non-confrontational, some point down the line they'll start cheating again. Because what they get from the game is them being this superhero, and they don't want the dice to tell them otherwise. Failure's a part of role-playing, but not everyone wants it to be a part of their role-playing. And that kind of spoils the experience for the rest of us. The best way to deal with that, ultimately, is to not play with those players, which is a shame.